Environmental assessments are an important part of stopping foodborne disease outbreaks and improving food safety. Environmental assessments are used during outbreak investigations to help determine how and why foodborne pathogens were able to spread. This allows us to stop current outbreaks by implementing effective control measures, and it helps to prevent similar outbreaks in the future. As we move forward, it's important to keep the goal of environmental assessments in mind. Recall that the objectives of environmental assessment are to identify contributing factors that introduced or otherwise permitted contamination, proliferation, and survival of pathogens in the environment, to identify the environmental antecedents that allowed the contributing factors to occur, and finally, to generate recommendations for informed interventions. Contributing factors and environmental antecedents are two terms that are important to remember while conducting an environmental assessment. Contributing factors are factors that introduce or otherwise permit the contamination, proliferation, and survival of pathogens. Contributing factors are distinct from violations that you would find in an inspection report. Practices such as improper thawing, prolonged preparation time, and improper hot holding are all examples of contributing factors. A complete list of predetermined contributing factors can be found on the National Environmental Assessment Reporting System's website. Environmental antecedents, on the other hand, are the conditions leading to the contamination, survival, or increase of biological or chemical agents in food. Environmental antecedents are the reason why contributing factors occur, and they are often referred to as root causes. Environmental antecedents may be related to people, equipment, food process, food type, economics, or other circumstances. There are 5 broad steps to conducting an environmental assessment during an outbreak investigation. First, planning and preparation. Second, the site visit. Third, environmental sampling, which may or may not be necessary depending on the pathogen. Fourth, the sampling wrap-up. And finally, verification and delivery to lab. In this training, we'll be focusing on steps 1 and 2 and reviewing some best practices for interviewing food workers and managers during an outbreak investigation. Before going to the facility to conduct the assessment, it's important to be fully prepared. Make sure to coordinate with the lab, gather the supplies that you will need, and do some pre-planning with the investigation team. Pre-planning includes considerations such as knowing the type of establishment you're going into. Is it part of a chain, or is it an independent establishment? Make sure to review the establishment's file and history. It's also important to review the epidemiological data. Is there a suspect pathogen that you should be aware of? Additionally, it's important to get into the right mindset. An environmental assessment is not an inspection, and it should not be approached as such. During the site visit, you will walk through the facility and conduct interviews with both management and the employees. Once you arrive at the facility and are ready to begin interviewing, there are several things to keep in mind. While you should introduce yourself to the manager and explain the reason for your visit as soon as you step into the facility, it can be helpful to first observe the facility and employee behavior from the outside or a public area. When speaking with food workers and managers, always remain conversational and professional. Developing rapport with those who you are interviewing is crucial for gathering accurate and useful information during your assessment. During the interview, be mindful of body language and tone and focus on the investigation rather than regulations. Often, environmental antecedents aren't covered by regulation. Additionally, it's important to avoid leading questions Interviews with managers allow us to better understand the facility and its policies and practices. When interviewing managers, ask questions about the facility. Is the facility an independent establishment or part of a chain? Are any foods prepared or partially prepared at a different location? Ask about the kitchen managers and food workers. Do the kitchen managers receive food safety training? What about food workers? Are any of the kitchen managers food safety certified? Any of the food workers? Ask about the facility's cleaning and food temperature policies. Do they have a policy or schedule for cleaning frequently touched surfaces? Are records of food temperatures kept? Lastly, ask the manager about employee health practices. Are there any policies or procedures that require ill food workers to tell a manager about their symptoms? Do kitchen managers or food workers receive pay when they miss work due to illness? Do employees feel obligated to go to work while sick? Any food handlers involved in the production, preparing, or handling of suspect foods should be interviewed. This is an opportunity to ask more direct questions about the investigation. When interviewing workers, ensure them of the confidentiality of their responses. Ask about their specific duties and inquire about any changes in preparation or production that may have occurred. Additionally, ask if anyone involved in food prep has been ill recently and probe for specific symptoms such as vomiting and diarrhea. To conclude your site visit after conducting interviews, make sure to compare manager and food worker responses to your own observations. There may be discrepancies between what you were told and what This concludes the quick train video on best practices for interviewing food workers and managers during an outbreak investigation. For a more in-depth look at conducting interviews during a foodborne outbreak investigation, check out the full webinar from the New York Food Safety Center of Excellence, which is linked in the credits and in the description box below. For a full training on conducting environmental assessments, please consider accessing the Center for Disease Control and Prevention's Environmental Assessment Training Series and the NEARS Guidance Manual, the latter of which will be available in PDF format in the description box for this video. Actually done in the facility. Before leaving, sit down with the facility manager and discuss your findings and why you were there. Share any educational materials or resources you have with the manager in order to prevent any future outbreaks. Finally, share your contact information and ask if the manager has any questions before leaving. as they could affect how interviewees respond. For example, instead of asking, "Is food left out for long periods of time during prep?" ask a more open-ended question, such as, "Could you walk me through a typical food prep process?" When interviewing managers and workers, it's also important to interview them separately and in private, as this could also affect how interviewees respond. Circumstances. During this quick train video, we'll be reviewing best practices for interviewing food workers and managers during an outbreak investigation or as part of an environmental assessment.